Well, welcome everyone. Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are joining us from. I'm Laura Chase, President and CEO of ITSA America. Thank you for taking the time to join our webinar today. I'm going to give some brief intro remarks, but I am going to be brief because we've got the ITSA America team on today to give you a real in-depth overview of our activities for the coming year, and I want to make sure that we have time to get through that and to any questions. And so I will get started. Go to the next slide, Elizabeth. ITSA America, as many of you know, our vision is a better future transformed by intelligent mobility, one that is safer, greener, and smarter. And this vision is what all of our members coalesce around. So ITSA America is made up of public sector entities from all levels of government, so MPOs, transit, city DOTs, state DOTs, and then also the private sector in many different areas, so technology companies, automotive companies, traffic management companies, data companies, infrastructure and engineering firms. And so we have the breadth of the private sector, the breadth of the public sector, and we have academic and research institutions, and all of those entities come together to foster the research and deployment of intelligent transportation technologies. This vision and our mission allows us as a community to move forward and save lives, promote sustainable transportation and climate resiliency, grow more access and opportunity for all Americans through our transportation system. Go ahead to the next slide. So we have a few new faces, both in our leadership and in our staff this year. So I want to quickly just give an overview. So our board is made up of 35 members. It is chaired by Roger Millar, Secretary of the Washington State Department of Transportation. Our vice chair is Desi Ukashevic from Ford. Our secretary is Manali Shah from Google. And our treasurer is Chris Armstrong at Panasonic. We're very pleased and proud to have their leadership this year. Next slide, please. And then staff, you will see some new faces and some familiar faces today. This is an overview of our staff. And again, you'll hear from many of these folks today. Kristen White is our new COO. So she is really responsible for a lot of the day-to-day operations of the association. We also have Tracy Larkin-Thomason, who is heading up our programs department. And the two of them are working hand in hand to ensure that both our policy and committee work and our programmatic work are in sync and coordinated and help achieve our mission. So I'm also going to call out Christy Cameron, who's our CFO. She leads our finance and accounting department. And you will see others on this list, but right now I'm going to turn it over to Lindsay Shelton-Gross, who is the head of our membership and marketing, to give a brief membership overview.
Thank you so much, Laura. I really appreciate such an excellent introduction to what ITS America really stands for and the organization and who some of us are. My job with ITS America, as Laura mentioned, is to head up membership and marketing initiatives. So Elizabeth, if you can go to the next slide. So why ITS America? Our core membership benefits will really be outlined by our staff today. So I'm just going to touch on kind of the basics, and then our true experts will detail these out in today's presentation. As Laura mentioned, we have a very diverse membership of both public and private organizations, along with academic and research institutions. Our core membership benefits include things like conferences and events, like our annual meetings and hosting the ITS World Congress. We have an excellent team that provides a bunch of policy and legislative resources, which includes advocacy and education in Congress, recently IIJA analysis and implementation guidance. We have member-driven standing committees, which Brenna will get to here in a moment, which are open to participation from all members. We have an excellent digital education series that really showcases how much we value public and industry educational opportunities. Our members are subject matter experts. So our member organizations have the opportunity to present their own webinars on a variety of topics. Additionally, ITSA staff and our board of directors and other industry leaders have the chance to update stakeholders in the transportation industry with policy insights, and even special initiatives like our Mobility XX program, which again, Kristen will touch on later. We have an excellent programs and research team that handles trends analysis, research, and reports, and has a relationship with the US DOT and support contracts. And then we're doing a few new things in 2022, including the development of a workshop series for local policymakers. Joining us is easy. Our application is available online with our due schedule. You can reach out at any time to membership@itsa.org. Our membership team is always happy to schedule one-on-one talks via Zoom or phone to answer any specific questions you may have. And our recently revamped due schedule is also available on our website. Elizabeth, can you go to the next slide? Thanks. Very quickly, I'll also touch on our state chapters. ITS America has 26 chapters that represent 44 states in a variety of regions. We have great relationships with these chapters. They do maintain individual governance in their own membership, but they really are truly the grassroots and local support of ITS priorities and projects and business-to-business activities in their regions. More information is again available on our website, but as ITS America staff, we are always more than willing to make the connections to state chapter leadership if you are interested in learning more about things happening in specific regions. Next slide. I am actually going to kick this back to Brenna Rivet, who is our Policy Programs Manager, and she is going to talk a little bit about our standing committees, which is really the core of our work in ITS America.
Great, thank you so much, Lindsay, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to be providing a quick overview of our committee work for 2022. And for those of you who are new to ITS America or are just joining this webinar today, this is a list of our 6 standing committees, which is our key sort of areas. We have automated vehicles, smart infrastructure, emerging technologies, mobility on demand, sustainability and resiliency, and Vitax and connected transportation. Can you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So our AV committee this year is being led by Greg with Texas A&E TTI and Christina with Velodyne, and they have really 2 major focus areas this year that I'm going to sort of overview for you guys. One of those efforts is they will be co-leading our new cybersecurity working group along with the Smart Infrastructure Committee. The working group will be building on the recommendations that ITS America submitted to the Senate EPW committee last summer, as well as producing guidance on ways to better secure our transportation system against cyber attacks. The other main focus area is taking the AV principles that the committee developed over last summer and spring and delving into how we really bring those principles to life. We had really, really great member engagement during this effort, and we're really looking forward to taking them to the next level with implementation. In addition to that, we're also looking at developing some one-pagers on key topics that the committee will identify throughout the year and continuing to work towards a national framework for AVs, which has been a long-term goal of ours. Next slide, please. Great. Our Smart Infrastructure Committee this year is being led by Ted Bailey with WashDOT and Dan Corey with AECOM, and they have some really big goals for this year. Firstly, this committee is going to be housing our IIJA implementation working group. And this working group will really be delving into the bill and helping our members understand the funding, how to access it. And we will also, it will be made up of members from all 6 committees. So the idea is that while this working group is housed under Smart Infrastructure, the folks that are serving on it will be from a whole bunch of different committees, and we'll make sure that we really get all of those voices around the table with these efforts. The other thing that the committee will really be focusing on is co-leading the cybersecurity working group, as I mentioned on the last slide. And they will also be spending some time at looking at how public entities and private sector entities can work together more efficiently and effectively through the Tech Deployment Collaboration Initiative. Next slide, please. Next up is our Emerging Technologies Committee, and this committee is being led by Andrew Liu of AECOM and Maureen Bach with the Oregon Department of Transportation. And this committee has 3 major focus areas for 2022. The first is launching our digital twinning task force to really help our members understand digital twinning and how it can be used to bolster transportation. We actually did a survey of this committee last year, and we found that a lot of our members are really interested in digital twinning, and they've been sort of hearing about it and are sort of familiar with it, but aren't really sure how it can be used in their day-to-day operations and work. And so this task force is really going to delve into that and help our members tease that out. Additionally, we will be continuing our personal delivery device task force, which launched last year. And really this year, the big focus is planning a peer exchange where we can get a lot of different folks who are working on this issue area together to really talk about it and really delve into some of the issues that have arisen in that committee. We will also be continuing our efforts around urban air mobility, as well as thinking about how we can better integrate artificial intelligence and machine learning as they intersect with these key areas. I think it's something at our end of year meeting in this last November, a lot of our members were saying, you know, AI is really starting to kind of come into contact with these areas, and we really want to understand what that looks like. And so we're going to be making sure that we bring that into the discussions this year. Next slide, please. Our Mobility on Demand Committee this year is led by Sophia Moore with CODA and Brian No with SPIN, and they have quite a busy year ahead. The main focus area that we identified as a committee was around addressing barriers to MOD. We created a survey for our committee members to help hone in on what to prioritize within this theme, because we recognize that it's a very big theme, and we want to make sure that we are being, you know, really addressing the concerns our members have, and making sure that we're being really timely in the things that we're addressing. So we are sending that survey out to our committee, and that will help us sort of decide where we want to focus in on that area. Our Universal Basic Mobility Working Group will also be continuing their efforts. Last year, they really focused on defining UBM, as well as doing a lot of work around mobility wallets. And this year, there's going to be a really big focus within this group on equity as well, and kind of expanding those benefits. We are also launching a new working group, which is very exciting, called Friends of MOD. And this working group will focus on hosting peer exchanges and topical roundtables for the MOD community at large. We have some really amazing expertise on this committee, and we're really excited to bring these important conversations to a larger audience with their leadership, and really have these broader conversations across the whole industry. Next slide, please. Next up is our Sustainability and Resiliency Committee, which is led by Janet Walker-Ford with WSP and Seleta Reynolds with the Los Angeles Department of Transportation. The Sustainability Committee is really ready to hit the ground running with the IIJA implementation efforts, particularly those around sustainability and resiliency. The committee will also be tackling resiliency and undertaking a focused examination of transportation infrastructure from both an operations and a climate change perspective. We will also be continuing our efforts around road usage charge. That group will continue to meet, and we will be building on those principles that we developed last year. And Morgan Ellis, who is our Vice President of Sustainable Transportation, is here today and is happy to answer questions in the chat if folks would like to talk about that more. Next slide, please. And last but certainly not least is our Vitax and Connected Transportation Committee, which is led by Steve Kusiemba with WSP and Kelly Bartlett with the Michigan DOT. And this committee has two very hefty focus areas for this year. Firstly, the committee will be continuing to lead the effort to address the future of Vitax, as they have done for the last few years. They're currently working with a researcher to model scenarios in a limited spectrum environment, and that work is really going to heat up this year. And we're also still working to get that spectrum back from the FCC. So this group is really focused on being prepared for the future of Vitax, whatever the outcome there. And secondly, we are launching a new working group, which I am personally very excited about, which we are calling Vitax Decoded. And this group will focus on creating common terminology. We will be producing outreach materials for non-technical audiences, and generally being a non-technical complement to that future of Vitax working group. We really realize that there are so many benefits of Vitax that our members and the broader public who don't really have that technical background don't fully understand. And so this group is really going to be working on how do we sort of show these benefits, and how do we communicate this with folks that might not have this technical background. Next slide, please. And finally, this is a list of all of the active task forces and working groups that we have so far for 2022. It's quite a list. As you'll notice, some of them are continuations of last year, such as the future of Vitax, personal delivery devices, road usage charge, universal basic mobility, and urban air mobility. And it also includes our new efforts like cybersecurity, digital twinning, Friends of MOD, IIJA implementation, and Vitax decoded. So this is really where we're at right now with all of the working groups and task forces. And we really encourage you, if you're interested in these working groups, to get involved. I will actually put the sign up link in the chat after this for folks that might want to sign up. And if you have any questions about these working groups or task forces or any of the work that the committees are doing this year, please let me know. Feel free to put questions in the chat or Q&A or to reach out to me via email. And with that, I will hand it over to Tim to talk about our policy and IIJA efforts.
Thank you, Brenna, and thanks for the overview of all the committee work. I think the committees lay the foundation for a lot of what we do at ITS America. So I look forward to their continued work this year. We can go to the next slide, Elizabeth. I'm going to talk a little bit about ITS America's policy development process, as well as Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act implementation efforts. One of ITS America's core activities is developing transportation technology policy to support the development and deployment of transportation technology to make the transportation system safer, greener, and smarter. One of the strengths of our policies is that they enjoy broad support from a broad cross-section of the industry, our membership, both public and private. And policymakers find significant value in our policies, specifically in part because they understand it is supported by so many transportation industry stakeholders. While some other organizations offer policies supported by state DOTs or city DOTs or automakers, we're the only organization that includes all of these stakeholders in the industry, public and private, and develops broad transportation technology policy. Our policies impact legislation such as surface transportation reauthorization, infrastructure investment bills, and annual appropriations. They impact all manner of regulatory actions, including those implementing legislation, such as IIJA, as well as regulatory actions related to transportation technology, like connected vehicles and automated vehicles, and safety discretionary grant program implementation, and many others. Finally, it impacts industry thought leadership. As our colleagues at other organizations often coordinate with us on technology policy, and our policies are reflected in those from other organizations across the industry. And in fact, many of our members serve in leadership roles at other transportation agencies and transportation related organizations across the country. And I think our policy makes it out to those organizations in that way as well. So how do we develop policy? ITS America develops principles and policies across a broad range of issue areas focused on the development and deployment of transportation technology. This work is done primarily through the work of our 6 standing committees. The standing committees lead our policy development process, either by identifying the need in the first instance, or with direction from the board, or by suggestion from staff. The policy development process can vary depending on the type and depth of the policy being developed. Various approaches could include full committee development of policy principles to inform later policy efforts or to summarize policy positions. Establishing a task force or working group to dive deeper into policy on any given issue. And a lot of our task forces or working groups Brenna provide an overview of. Or it could be a multi-committee effort, including members of multiple committees on the same policy. The development process further varies within each of these examples, depending on the need, the scope of the policy, as well as timeline for development. And throughout this policy development process, we rely heavily on the knowledge, experience, and expertise of our members to inform that policy development. Though we also look to outside sources as appropriate. Often our principles or policy will be voted on in the first instance by a task force or working group, which will recommend it to the full committee for approval. Then the full committee will consider, revise, and approve the principles or policy for recommendation to the board of directors. At that point, the principles or policy will be recommended for adoption by the board of directors at its next quarterly board meeting, often proposed by the committee leadership itself. Early in the policy development process, we also seek to get board feedback through discussion of the issue area or consideration of proposed principles in advance of full policy. This allows the board the opportunity to weigh in on issues while under development and provides a preview of the upcoming policy that will be recommended for adoption. So how do we use the policies that we develop? ITS America's policies and principles drive our advocacy efforts at the federal level. They inform our views on surface transportation reauthorization, infrastructure legislation, as well as regulatory actions at USDOT, the Department of Energy, the FCC, and other agencies. And we ensure that our positions on legislative provisions and regulatory actions are informed by and consistent with that board-approved policy, all of which can be found on our website. We also use these policies to drive industry conversations surrounding important topics and inform our internal and external events throughout the year. I can think of several examples where policy has actually driven us within our working groups on the actions, the programmatic actions that we're taking. In 2021, we actually developed a number of new policies. Several policies and sets of principles were developed by the committees and then approved by the board of directors. This includes sustainability and resiliency policy, road usage charge program principles, equity, climate, safety, and infrastructure principles for automated and autonomous mobility, a national Vision Zero policy, equity policy, and broadband policy. In addition to all that, we also reviewed and updated our FAST Act reauthorization platform as needed in anticipation of infrastructure investment legislation that incorporated surface transportation reauthorization. Now I'll take a look a little bit at the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or IIJA, and ITS America's efforts related to IIJA implementation. We can go to the next slide. So as you all likely know, there was a large infrastructure bill that was passed late last year and signed into law in November, provides significant investment in transportation and infrastructure, and includes a number of ITS America policy priorities. The bill included historic funding levels, providing $274 billion in new investment for transportation and infrastructure under USDOT, including $110 billion for roads and bridges and other major projects, $65 billion for passenger rail and freight, and $39 billion for public transit. The bill also reauthorized the FAST Act for 5 years, providing $540 billion for fiscal years 2022 through 2026. Unfortunately, we are currently operating under a continuing resolution through into February of this year. And so we are subject to the 2021 obligation limitations. And some of the new programs within IIJA can't be implemented until there's funding provided in an FY 2022 appropriations bill to allow the administration of those programs. So that's something that we're continuing to watch and we will continue to stay on top of. IIJA itself did include significant expanded technology funding and eligibility. There were a number of wins that ITS America had for transportation technology that provide numerous opportunities to deploy ITS. One of the primary technology-focused funding opportunities is the $500 million provided for the Strengthening Mobility and Revolutionizing Transportation, or SMART grant program, for projects that incorporate innovative transportation technologies, including automation and connected vehicles and intelligent sensor-based infrastructure. However, there are also a number of new and existing programs that include technology as an eligible activity. Intelligent transportation technologies under the Congestion Relief Program and the Advanced Transportation Technologies and Innovative Mobility Deployment Program, ATTIMD. That's the renamed program from ATCMTD. Vehicle to infrastructure and infrastructure-based ITS is eligible under the $1.3 billion per year carbon reduction program. ITS deployment is eligible under the Promoting Resilient Operations for Transformative, Efficient, and Cost-Saving Transportation, or the PROTECT program, a $1 billion per year program. We secured eligibility for cybersecurity under the National Highway Performance Program and Surface Transportation Block Grant Program, as well as vehicle to pedestrian technology under STBGP. Also, Mobility on Demand is now eligible under the Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Improvement Program and the Rural Surface Transportation Grant Program. So you can see there was a number of increased eligibilities in addition to increased funding for a number of these programs. All told, the IIJA has the potential to deliver billions of dollars for new technology deployment across the country's transportation system. However, as we've noted in the past, in many places, the deployment of technology is an eligible activity, but not required. So it's incumbent upon us to ensure that USDOT views technology deployment as a priority, and that our members and other stakeholders in the industry see the opportunity and advantages of using this transportation funding to actually deploy technology. And we're currently pursuing an IIJA implementation plan to do just that. Our implementation plan will focus on implementation of IIJA programs and policies to prioritize technology deployment throughout federal surface transportation and infrastructure investment. While we achieved a number of policy priorities within the legislation, we must now ensure that those IIJA programs and policies are implemented in such a way as to prioritize technology deployment. We will evaluate and educate members on opportunities to develop and deploy transportation technologies under IIJA programs. This includes a deeper look into various programs alongside our membership to determine the best opportunities, and when possible, to identify best practices and other examples of how our members can use the funding available on technology. We'll also engage with USDOT and other agencies on program implementation and regulatory actions associated with implementing IIJA. We have already begun this process through outreach to USDOT, and this will include informing USDOT of ITS America and member positions and recommendations, participating in the regulatory implementation process, and inviting USDOT to present to our membership on IIJA policy and programs. Additionally, we're establishing an IIJA implementation working group that will focus on these efforts. Brennan discussed this. It will be housed under the Smart Infrastructure Committee, but it will be open to any ITS America member that wants to participate, and it will include designated members of each of the other 5 standing committees. The working group will conduct an analysis of programs and how to deploy technology within those programs, including developing recommendations for our members, the industry, and USDOT. These efforts will contribute to our responses to regulatory actions, including any official comments we submit as an organization, and will ultimately lead to the development of a guidebook for transportation technology opportunities under IIJA. So now to review some of our efforts that are already underway. Many of these efforts have already begun. We've reviewed a number of opportunities within IIJA and provided a summary analysis of provisions relevant to transportation technology and our priorities. We've developed a list of priority programs for advocacy and coordination with USDOT, including the SMART Grant Program, the ATTIMD program, Safe Streets and Roads for All grant program, electric vehicle charging infrastructure, both formula and discretionary grant programs, the Protect program, the carbon reduction program, and the congestion relief program, among others. And we've also participated in multiple conversations with USDOT officials related to technology-focused programs, technology eligibilities, climate programs, and the innovation principles that we saw USDOT release recently. We actually expect to host USDOT officials in the coming weeks and months to talk to our members about various aspects of IIJA implementation in these areas, and that'll provide an opportunity for our members to weigh in directly with USDOT officials. We've also begun the process of responding to a number of regulatory actions. This includes FHWA's request for information on the EV charging infrastructure, formula, and discretionary grant programs, as well as OSTR's request for information on Transportation Research and Development Strategic Plan. Both of those regulatory comments are due before the end of the month, and we've solicited member feedback and we'll be incorporating that into ITS America's submitted comments. We expect that many more regulatory actions will be initiated by USDOT, and that we'll continue to work with the IIJA Implementation Working Group, relevant ITS America standing committees, as well as our broader membership as we develop responses to these actions. Additionally, we expect notices of funding opportunities to come out for various funding programs, discretionary grant opportunities, and we'll make sure to coordinate and communicate these to our membership and have further discussions on those specific grant programs and funding opportunities as they arise. And then finally, we'll be holding a number of webinars and events for members in the coming weeks and months related to IIJA implementation. This includes events on IIJA technology and grant programs, implementation of IIJA priorities, as well as IIJA climate programs. With that, I'm happy to take any questions, and I will hand it off to Rachel Repberg, our Director of Meetings and Education. Rachel?
Thanks, Tim. Elizabeth, you can go to the next slide. So we are really excited to be convening with our members and with stakeholders in the industry again this year in person. We are looking forward to holding 2 in-person forums where we are going to be having interactive discussions and showcasing the ITS America's mobility principles. These will be held in the spring and in the fall time. We are also building on our webinar series that we've started in 2020 when the pandemic started. And as Tim just mentioned, we'll be having an IIJA webinar series. Our first webinar is actually in a couple of weeks, in the first 2 weeks of February. We're also going to be holding a webinar series focusing on sustainability and resiliency, where we'll be discussing the barriers, opportunities, and how our members can understand the innovations with transportation electrification. We'll be focusing on big data, and we will also be focusing on research, where our institutions and academics will be showcasing the research they are leading to promote a more sustainable and efficient transportation system. We'll also be focusing on our member webinar series. That is an opportunity for our members to present to other ITS America members and industry stakeholders what their organizations are doing in the industry and with new innovative ideas. We also have the ITS Insider Trends Report. That is a quarterly trends report that our technical programs department puts out each quarter. That focuses on mobility issues, new technology developments, and vital deployment strategies. Next slide. We are excited to be hosting this year's ITS World Congress in Los Angeles, California. Did you know that LA has its own innovation zone funneling unprecedented investments into transportation innovation like zero emissions, last mile delivery, and other inventions from ITS leaders? The 28th ITS World Congress, the first US World Congress since 2014, will be held September 18th through the 22nd in the heart of this innovation zone to explore our theme, Transformation by Transportation. You can join us for 5 days of panels, workshops, exhibits, and tech showcases on topics like MOD, automated vehicles, workforce diversity in ITS, Vitax, smart infrastructure and sustainability, as well as emerging tech. While upholding the COVID-19 safety precautions, the World Congress is anticipating over 8,000 global attendees, over 60 countries, 1,000 speakers, and leaders from public agencies, private companies, research institutes, and academics. We're looking forward to having over 20 different technical tours and demonstrations, as well as over 300 exhibiting companies for you to meet, learn about their ideas, and see how you can partner in the future. Even more exciting this year, you can look forward to a new startup area and a competition to advance new ideas in emerging tech. We're also hosting a student program with education and projects for K-12 and university students, as well as continuing our Mobility XX discussions on how we as an industry can advance more women and people of color in our industry. So we look forward to welcoming you to Los Angeles, September 18th through the 22nd. And on this next slide, I will talk about a couple ways that you can get involved yourselves. We have an open call for contributions that's open March 1st, open until March 1st, and you could submit a paper or a session idea. So please feel free to engage with us on those levels so we can hear from you and your companies. You can also showcase your company's latest technologies and solutions on our exhibit floor. We have an open exhibit floor. The floor plan is on our website at itsamericaevents.com. So please feel free to reach out to us if you're interested in exhibiting. We also have customizable sponsorship packages where you can get your company's exposure with attendees from OEMs, technology companies, federal, state, and local governments, and our international attendees, and experience firsthand technologies through our demonstrations. We have open demonstrations where your company could demonstrate on our show floor or on the streets outside so that we can see your company's technologies live and in person. So we look forward to inviting you to LA, and we hope you will join us. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me or Elizabeth Johnson on my team. And now I'll pass things over to Carlos Albin, the Vice President for Technical Programs.
Great, thank you very much, Rachel. And Elizabeth, we can go to the next slide, please. So hello, everyone. My name is Carlos Albin, as Rachel mentioned. I'm Vice President for Technical Programs here at ITS America. Some of you may be aware that ITS America has a long-standing relationship with the U.S. Department of Transportation, through which we provide technical support on a variety of projects that are funded by the ITS Joint Program Office. In my role, I serve as the program manager for our overarching contract with US DOT, manage our client relationships with the ITS JPO, and provide technical support and guidance on most of our projects. I also wanted to shout out the rest of our team within the programs department, which includes Sarah Davidson, Kevin Vida, Morgan Ellis, and Tracy Larkin-Thomason. We really do have a great team with diverse backgrounds and subject matter expertises, which leave us well positioned to support the work of the US DOT. So a little background on what we do. Most of the work that is produced within the technical programs department focuses on stakeholder outreach and engagement, training and education, knowledge transfer, and of course, research. Our research predominantly focuses on sort of identification and highlighting developing trends within the ITS industry. ITS Insider, which was previously mentioned by my colleague Rachel, is a perfect example of the type of research that is done within the programs department. We have already begun the work on the next issue of ITS Insider, which is scheduled to be released in mid-March. And the focus of that report will be on digital twinning, which was also mentioned earlier by my colleague Brenna Revet. So again, ITS Insider is free to all members. So we do encourage that if you are not already taking the opportunity to download those reports, when those announcements come out of the release of those reports, please do take a look at those. There's a lot of great information in those trends reports. The second thing I wanted to highlight is the UTC Guest Speaker Program, which we recently launched in partnership with the ITS JPO in the University of Transportation Centers program. This program aims to connect transportation leaders and innovators with university and college students. These panel sessions allow industry professionals to discuss the cutting-edge technologies that are being developed and deployed to improve the safety and efficiency of the transportation system, and allow speakers to share their personal experiences, challenges, and successes in the field, and discuss how to better prepare for entering the transportation and ITS workforce. So every session is focused on a specific technology or concept within ITS. The next session will take place in late February and focus on mobility on demand. As we have now for several years, we continue to offer our trainings to our state chapters through our partnership with the US DOT's ITS Professional Capacity Building Program. The goal of these sessions is to enable state and local, public and private sector professionals the opportunity to receive free training on topics that are at the forefront of the ITS industry. For the past 2 years, these offerings have shifted to fully virtual, but we are optimistic that this spring we will once again be able to go back to in-person trainings, which would be great, since I know personally I've coordinated with many state chapters in the past to incorporate these trainings into your annual meeting programming. So as was discussed during the last thing I'll mention, as was discussed during our state chapter strengthening workshop in Charlotte, we are currently engaging and will be engaging with US DOT to try and incorporate some new training topics into the current list of offerings. Quickly, another product I wanted to mention is a new monthly publication, which will provide updates briefly highlighting select MOD-related news, partnerships, or trends of note. This publication will launch starting in February and is being developed as part of a new project we have procured to support US DOT's Mobility on Demand program. We are still working behind the scenes to confirm some details related to the publication, but we will have additional information soon up on our website when that information is available, and you will be able to opt in to receive this free publication. Under this project, we will also likely be hosting some MOD-related webinars, educational sessions, peer-to-peer exchanges, and roundtables. And lastly, the last thing I'll just quickly mention is that, as always, we continue to diversify attempt to diversify our reach and identify opportunities to partner with other agencies beyond the US Department of Transportation. One of those agencies would be the US Department of Energy. And my colleagues Morgan Ellis and Tracy Larkin-Thomason are leading our efforts to establish our working relationship with the DOE. So I'm happy to provide my contact information in the chat and discuss really some of the products and services that the programs department is working on a day-to-day basis if you'd like to learn more information about the work that we do within the programs department. So with that, I will toss things back to my colleague, Kristen White.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, regardless of where you are across the globe. We are so thrilled that you have stuck with us today to learn more about our programming and our priorities in 2022. Before we conclude, and we really do want to hear any open discussion, questions, or other ideas you might have for ITS America for the coming year, there's one thing that we would be remiss if we didn't talk about, and it was actually already brought up in the chat box, this idea of how mobility, future technologies, and the ITS American vision intersects with equity and how we advance key topics in that discourse in the public and private spheres. So Mobility XX, as you'll see on the next slide, is one of the newer initiatives in partnership with the RAY and WTS International to help address the question why our system has so many gaps for women and people of color. And this is one of the stark statistics that we continue to reinforce with our members and non-members alike, in that only less than 15% of our workforce in the transportation sector is actually held by women, and much fewer than women of color. But this is not something that we can continue to rest on our laurels and think it might change. As the World Economic Forum reminds us, it will be over 208 years if we do not take action to bring gender equity and gender parity into America and the United States. So on the next slide, you'll see a challenge for us all to re-envision what it means to be a part of the national conversation on equity and promoting the future of the workforce in America. We know that women and people of color face very different challenges in our system because it wasn't designed for them. For example, the system didn't consider things like underserved and underinvested communities, street harassment, street lighting. Even the design of some vehicles does not consider the different shapes and sizes and needs of caregivers in all different factors of life. And so we believe with the Mobility XX pledge that we can challenge you all to join us in this renewed effort that builds off the amazing platform that WTS and many other sectors are advocating to grow the workforce of women in our industry. So the Mobility XX pledge is challenging us all to take any one of a number of approaches to grow the number of women by 10% in 10 years, so that by 2031, at least 25% of our sector will be made up of women and people of color. That can be things like making sure your panels are more diverse, making sure that you're hiring, your retention and inclusion and belonging strategies are thinking about these challenges, and even reading some of the new thought leadership in this space, like the LADOT Changing Lanes report that said that the system is simply failing women because women can pay as much as twice the same amount as men just to use the system to account for the challenges we face for street harassment and low incomes and being caregivers who trip chain. That is why, as you saw in the chat box, we're building off the Mobility XX pledge, which is found at mobilityxx.org, and also thinking about convening some thought leadership with members and non-members alike to host both an equity roundtable and a workforce roundtable to understand what some of the challenges are, even in 2022, that we need to continue to address and grow that pipeline just for today and tomorrow. So we continue to talk about this. This is something that's really important for Laura, myself, and many of our members. With that, before we conclude, I'm going to hand it back to Lindsay Shelton-Gross to remind us all about the opportunities to look at our communications and social media information sharing. And then we're going to conclude with Q&A. Lindsay, back to you.
Thank you so much, Kristen. And Elizabeth, if you just want to go to the next slide, that would be great. So just a few things, a quick plug. If you are a heavy social media user or a light social media user, ITS America has several very active platforms. We use those for informing both our members and the transportation community at large about our events and educational opportunities, as well as news items, both from the association and from our members. So if you are a current member and you have some news that you'd like to share about projects or partnerships, please reach out. We're always happy to reshare and amplify that information on our own platforms. And we think that that's really crucial for kind of the success and the promotional benefits of your membership. If you are interested, I would highly encourage you to follow our corporate pages and join the standalone LinkedIn group that is listed here. It's just ITS America. Again, we have several member communications that we've talked about here in reference. Our Momentum member newsletter comes out every other Monday. Our ITS Policy Rundown newsletter, which is an excellent resource for all things coming from the policy team, comes out on Fridays. If you feel like you should be receiving those and you're not, please feel free to reach out to us. I'll make sure I have the contact information in the chat. Occasionally there will be firewall issues, but we try to make sure you're getting all of this information since we think it's important. Again, some of the publications have already been referenced. Carlos talked a lot about the ITS Insider, policy white papers and analysis, and some other things that are on our website at itsa.org. If you have not had the chance to go through that website, there's a lot of really great resources there, specifically under the advocacy and the events pages, including all of our webinars that have been pre-recorded and are available for you to watch on demand. There's a really great library there of things that I would highly suggest looking into. We also have a blog on our website, which is new, recently new to ITS America. We're always looking for some thought leadership, and anyone who's interested in perhaps pitching us a feature or a post for that blog, again, I will post that information to contact us in the chat, comms@itsa.org, and we're always looking for our members to contribute to that as well. I think that is it. Again, I'm going to click off right now. I'll put some information in the chat, and I think you're going to just close things out and ask for any questions, Kristen.
And Lindsay, we're actually going to bring you back because we had a great question in the Q&A related to how does ITS America share that information? For example, should we just be plugged in to our Twitter feed or LinkedIn? How plugged in should our members be? And I have a funny question. It should be get plugged into all of them, but thoughts on this?
I again, agree with you, get plugged into all of them. Certainly, we are very active on Twitter because we find that people tend to use that platform the most when it comes to both sharing and receiving some information. We utilize our email a lot. So if you are a member organization or you belong to a company that is a member of ITS America and you feel like you're maybe not receiving emails from us, please let us know. Oftentimes, like I mentioned, it's a simple firewall issue that we can figure out. LinkedIn is also a great place for information. Certainly a lot of our member companies are active users on LinkedIn, and ITS America is as well. We try to reshare, but again, both our member news and some of our own things that are coming out of the association on educational opportunities or breaking news. So if you're active on LinkedIn and Twitter, I would say that's a great start. If you like photos and some of the other fun stuff, we're also on Instagram. So we're trying to reach you on any platform possible.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Lindsay, for her thought leadership. And again, everyone get engaged on social. It's the best way to learn about emerging and relevant news and trends. I just want to pause here and see if there's any other questions, discussion, raised hands. Come on, this is the opportunity to stump the ITS America experts. Great. So we have a question in the chat box from Suman asking, is there a planned social meet and greet coming up in 2022, even online? You know, Suman, that is such a great question. As we all know, we are still trying to protect the health, wellness, and social being of all of our families, friends, staff, and members and non-member partners. And so we have, as you can imagine, had to be very strategic about any sort of in-person events that we're planning. A couple thoughts on that is we are trying to ensure that our in-person events, such as the roundtables, the IIJA workshops that you've heard about today, will be planned somewhere around April and after to accommodate the emerging variants of COVID-19 and all the evolving trends surrounding public health, wellness, and the CDC guidelines. That said, there is this idea that you mentioned about a potential opportunity for an online virtual social gathering, and I will put my hand up first that I am always happy to gather in that event. So we will take that idea back to our team and see if that is something we can support in the next coming months. Otherwise, everyone, I guess virtual drinks are on Suman. And the next question I see here is a great one. How will ITS America address climate issues? So I am actually going to introduce how we're addressing this topic. And then I do believe that Morgan Ellis, who is our Vice President of Sustainability and Resiliency, is on. And I would love to throw this to her as she is our new key technical expert in this space. And Tim Drake is our Vice President of Legislative Affairs and Policy, who's also helping us address this issue. So to Ellen's question, sustainability and resiliency is a huge priority for ITSA America, our board and staff. And so we have actually grown in this space. Less than 2 years ago, we talked about sustainability, but it was not a major platform as far as our standing advisory committees and the policy priorities of our board of directors explicitly. And that has changed, and it has needed to for quite some time. So now we have stood up our Standing Advisory Committee on Sustainability and Resiliency, and that is chaired by some folks in the transit and private sectors that are really trying to lead in this space, as well as looking at our different sustainability policies and the new board-approved policies around this space. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to anyone from our team that wants to chime in on that effort. Otherwise, after Tim, we will throw it back to the remaining questions. Tim, go ahead.
Yeah, and I want to make sure that we get Morgan involved here in this conversation. I think Kristen's right on. We established a Sustainability and Resiliency Committee in early 2021 as part of our standing committee reorganization. That committee has looked at sustainability and resiliency policy and developed a pretty broad policy that the board adopted in the spring of last year. And then also moved to look at road usage charge policy, and that effort will be ongoing. Additionally, we're continuing to look at climate-related programs and policies within the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. Obviously, that was a priority for this Congress and this administration, and we're continuing to work closely with USDOT's officials that are in charge of climate programs. So we look forward to the EV charging infrastructure, as well as kind of resiliency and protect and carbon reduction programs, all of these programs that were included in IIJA. Additionally, at the committee level, we're working on a discussion on resiliency. And Morgan, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about that.
Sure. Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Kristen. This is a great question and something that's really a peak interest of mine. And so, yeah, as Tim mentioned, we have started conversations with a variety of our members related to what is resiliency. And that covers everything from operations to our systems, as well as climate change. And how are we planning and thinking about resiliency with climate change? How are we enabling our members to bring forward the best information related to not only climate change, but how to prepare and adapt to these changes that we're seeing every day? This is going to be a growing conversation and one I'm very excited about. And I think it's going to be multifaceted. We're looking for how technology can help make information better, data better, to make our DOTs and our members and companies more prepared to be nimble in reacting and planning for climate change. So I know that's really broad, but I think we want a broad umbrella. We want to be able to pull in conversations that are able to talk about climate change and how ITSA can best position ourselves and our members to be prepared to think through planning related to climate change. So I'm looking forward to these conversations in 2022.
Thank you, Morgan and Tim, for your thought leadership and to the great question on how we're trying to prioritize sustainability. Again, building off what other coalition organizations are doing. As we all know, as both members or new members or non-members, ITSA America is here to help convene in spaces where there's an opportunity to build off the thought leadership of others, not to simply be redundant in those key policy areas. There's a couple several questions remaining in the Q&A, and I want to actually head on one first, and then we'll ask Carlos Albin to talk a little bit more about some of our opportunities to engage our younger and newer voices to transportation mobility. So I'm going to throw it back to Tim Drake, as we had a question about the spectrum and the FCC decision. So Tim, there is some big stuff happening in the next week. Would you give just a brief highlight about the Supreme Court oral arguments and what's coming down the pipeline?
Yeah, so as most of you likely know, over the summer, ITS America, along with AASHTO, submitted a legal appeal to the DC Circuit Court of the FCC's decision to reallocate the lower 45 megahertz of spectrum out of the 5.9 gigahertz band and for use by unlicensed devices. We advocated for a quick timeline for that case and were able to wrap up briefing in November. And actually, oral argument is scheduled for January 25th. So that is coming up in about a week. we're looking forward to that oral argument and presenting our arguments to the panel of judges at the DC Circuit Court. And then we would expect, a decision by the court sometime in the coming months. I would point out that beyond that kind of discussion over spectrum allocation, there are a number of outstanding issues remaining from the FCC's further notice of proposed rulemaking that impact the 30 megahertz that remain. And that 30 megahertz and the future of Vitax is something that we've worked on diligently for over a year now on trying to determine what can be done within that 30 megahertz and how to make best use of it. Some of the outstanding issues in that regulatory action that remain are interference, so power limits on devices operating in the lower 45, and limiting out-of-band emissions so that the upper 30 megahertz is protected, as well as what to do with reimbursement for incumbent licensees. And we've called for the provision of additional spectrum should the FCC move forward and finalize the reallocation. So there's a number of outstanding issues. It's something that we continue to engage on, but we are looking forward to those oral arguments next week.
Thank you, Tim. And thanks, everyone, for the great questions today. Our last question, as we'll have time throughout the year for many, many more Q&A and thoughtful discussion, is something that's really near and dear to all of our hearts in this sector, is how we empower and get more information out to young professionals or new professionals. So I'm going to throw it to Carlos Albin to help us out with that.
Great. Thank you very much, Kristen. And yes, and thank you for those who provided those questions. We received a question about how to get more involved if you're a young professional, as well as any mentorship programs that ITS America may be offering. I would answer that with, we currently do not have a mentorship program within ITS America, but it is something that we are heavily engaged with ITS JPO, and specifically the Professional Capacity Building Program. It's a high priority for us in 2022 as an organization. I know workforce development is something that is not only a high priority for ITS America, but obviously for ITS JPO as well. We did a research earlier in 2021 that focused on integrating ITS student groups and establishing opportunities or resources for students who are interested in careers in ITS. And one of the things that one of the main takeaways from that report and interviews that we did was that mentorship programs are a vital part of sort of those workforce development and preparing to enter the ITS workforce. So we have, as a follow-up following up on that research, an opportunity to engage with USDOT and see if there are any opportunities for either ITS America or other organizations that we could partner with to either stand up a mentorship program and also create some more resources for our young professionals. So even if it's just access to information that's available, how to perhaps connect with the subject matter expert industry leader through a mentorship program. So that is something that is in the works, and hopefully we will have more information to share on that in the early part of 2022. But just know that it is a high priority area, not just within the technical programs department, but within the organization as a whole.
Thank you, Carlos, and to all of you for joining us today. As we close, again, I'm Kristen White, COO of ITS America. So thrilled that you were interested in learning more about our priorities for 22 and reaching out to your networks to see how we can grow a strong coalition to advance the future of mobility in America. As Secretary Pete Buttigieg noted at CES and just last week at TRB, they've announced their new innovation principles, challenging us all to understand how we can advance technology to meet our policy goals, to make sure that our streets are safer, that our communities are smarter, and that we bridge transportation gaps to make sure that we can grow more access and sustainable technology transportation solutions. So with that, we appreciate for joining us today to learn how we can advance our mission to make our world safer, greener, and smarter. And we wish you all the best in the coming new year in 2022. Thank you.